hey, you're the only one in this cohort that has this strength. This is what makes you unique. When you're doing your interviews, you need to talk about this because this makes you stand out from others.
Welcome to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. I'm your host, Clayton O'Brien, and I'm the fire chief for the city of Oregon. All right, welcome to the episode Triple P Podcast, and today we actually have Courtney and Jeremy with us from Plugged In, coaching and consulting. So we're excited to be able to talk about all the things that they have to offer. And today we're thrilled to have both of you. But Courtney, you're an associate dean of the Fire and EMS Training at WCTC. And Jeremy, you're a battalion chief, and I'm not even going to try to butcher what fire department you're at. So you're going to have to fill in your bios, if you will. Just let the audience know, what WCTC stands for, and then also let's talk about what fire department you're from, Jeremy. So welcome to the Triple P Podcast, and we'll start with you, Courtney.
Okay, thank you so much for having us. My name is Courtney Hull. I currently serve as the Associate Dean at Waukesha County Technical College. We have a lot of interesting names here in the Milwaukee area, but we're essentially a one-county technical college just outside of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and we're one of 16 tech colleges in the state of Wisconsin. And so we're the local Fire and EMS Training Center. We train everywhere from emergency medical responder up to critical care paramedic, and then all of the fire certifications as well, including offering associate degrees in both fire and paramedicine. So I've been with Waukesha County Technical College. I actually started there in 2007 as a part-time instructor, and then transitioned out of the field. I was a career firefighter for about 5-6 years prior to that. And then transitioned to my role in fire and EMS education, and I've been there for the last 15 years. So the opportunity to blend my passion for teaching and the fire service and leading the department is really kind of, I feel like I found my purpose. It helps me to blend kind of all of those different roles. And the reason that we're talking about some of the topics we're talking about today is because we have had a lot of students come through that kind of next generation of first responders, and the things that while we're supposed to be teaching them is the things that they're teaching us that we feel like we have an opportunity to share with others to kind of better relate to this next group coming in.
Well, thank you, Courtney. Jeremy, how about you want to share a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. Yeah. Again, thanks for having me as well. And Jeremy Blair, Battalion Chief with the city of Waukesha, and we're a suburb of Milwaukee, kind of in the metro area, southeast Wisconsin. And I've been here for going on 20 years and started in the fire service back right out of high school, volunteering, paid on call, and then eventually going into full time. And I actually started teaching at WCTC early in my career, about 2006. And, as an adjunct instructor, teaching EMS and paramedic, and then moving more into the fire certification courses, where the past 6 or 7 years, I've been leading our dual enrollment program. And just to talk a little bit about that, dual enrollment academy or dual credit program is high schoolers, whether juniors or seniors in high school, apply for our program. They do a letter. They get a letter of recommendation from their guidance counselors, and then we do a complete interview process and a selection process where we then select about 24 students to participate in our program. And the program is essentially starts in August, ends in May, and it's Monday through Friday, 8 to noon, where they obtain a Firefighter EMT and Firefighter 1, which are basic requirements in the state of Wisconsin to be hired at most fire departments. So that's been my journey this past several years, and truly what drives me is the connection with the students and watching them grow. And if anybody can relate, who has kids can relate, it would be like having your kiddos start in T-ball and work their way through middle school and high school and maybe into college, and just watching them grow. Or maybe if they're not playing sports, just watching them go through school, and seeing them walk across the stage for graduation in high school. So very similar to our program at CTC. Is what's engaging is watching students that have this completely blank canvas. You have no idea what their background is, but you get to mold them and show them the way. And that's really what has been driving me to continue with this passion and work towards placement in fire departments when they get out of our program.
That was a question I was going to ask Jeremy when you brought that up. Do you guys track, so those students, you've got a limited number in the dual enrollment program. Do you track that? Do they get hired as full-time firefighter EMTs? What's that like success rate look like for you guys?
Yeah, and Courtney probably has a little more statistics on it. However, through the use of, and I'll talk a little bit about technology and how we keep in communication with some of our students once they've graduated, but truly during the process, it is a year-long process of getting them aligned with different fire departments in our region. But moving forward, I'm in a lot of times they're asking for recommendation letters and so on. So you kind of have an idea of where folks are going, and we get a lot of inquiries from our departments and chiefs looking to see who's available for hire. But Courtney, I think you've kind of been tracking some of this over the past couple of years, right?
Yeah, not as well as I'd like to. But what I can say is that any student that graduates our program that wants a full-time job is getting hired. Some of our kids, they're graduating at 17 or 18 years old, and they know that they have options and they're not ready to start employment at 18. So many of them are also taking advantage of some of the opportunities in our area. We have some great services that are offering internships that essentially give them full-time hours and then pay for their education. So then they continue on when they graduate the academy at 18. Then they come back to finish their fire protection degree and get their paramedic certification. And so, they're having about $10,000, $12,000 covered in tuition by a fire department, working essentially full-time hours as an intern. And then by the time they're 2021, then they want to get hired by a full-time department. So they really have, unlike, Jeremy and I got hired at about the same time in the early 2000s. We actually went to school together for our associate degree. So we've known each other for a long time. But back at that time, you would test for departments for years, and then you would take whatever job was offered to you because that's what was available. These kids, they have opportunities right out of graduating high school. And so they know that, and they're taking advantage of that. And that's part of the reason we like to share information with fire departments, is because you really now have to stand out as the employer of choice versus finding the candidate of choice, right? And so the departments that are really looking at and reflecting on how they're meeting those needs of the next generation, those are the ones that are doing well in recruiting. And those that are kind of like stuck in tradition and frustrated with why they aren't the way that we want them to be, are the ones that are having some of those recruitment issues and problems. And the emphasis really needs to be on us changing, not on them changing. So, and we do, we do prepare the students. It's not like we just, meet them where they're at and then let them continue on with what they're doing. We set standards and high expectations for them as well. But just to give you a couple of examples, we had one student, she graduated at 18 and immediately went on to paramedic. And 3/4 of the way through paramedic, she was hired full-time by a fire department. And so she was still 18, hired full-time, and had her paramedic license. And then this semester, we have our first student who, he actually went through the program his junior year. He had enough credits to graduate in December of his senior year, and he started our accelerated program this January. He just got picked up by a local department, and in August, so it would have been the August after graduating high school, he's a paramedic and hired full-time career.
Wow. What do you guys hear?
Really great success stories.
What do you hear from some of the students is in the classroom of saying what is the driving factor of which department they're going to pick? Is it more of the money? Is it more of the culture? What is really the driving factor that you're hearing at this generation coming out of high school of what they're looking for, where they want to work?
That's a great question. I can start off on that because I think we could all agree, being in the fire service, that each department has a different culture. We have the same goal, right? Put the wet stuff on the red stuff and service to the community and so on. But truly, we all have a different culture here. So when students ask me, or inquire about a department, of course I encourage them, but I will definitely, give them some further feedback on what department might meet their level of skills. For example, in our area, we have really busy departments and we have some moderately busy. And for a student that is, I've watched them grow, they were the ones that had their head down, not giving you eye contact, very, very to themselves in the beginning of class. You might need a department that has a little bit softer culture, right? And that might be a little bit slower to kind of ease them into that and let them grow organically versus throwing them into a department that has got multiple things going on at multiple times. So that's just, that's my method of sizing them up.
So they're kind of reaching back out to you to kind of see what place would be a better fit. You're not necessarily seeing them see what the driver is, because I think, like, for example, in our area in Ohio, and then throughout the entire state, we find that a lot of, well, maybe it's not necessarily right out of school though. Maybe it's just, laterals and the move afterwards. That is what the drive to pick it, because culture is what's driving it all. I believe that if it matches that and the people are in it for the right reasons, but just kind of curious on what the new ones, because remember we were in this like period of time where these students would be like, well, they would just, there's no commitment back to like how our parents were. They worked there for 30 years or whatever, where they'll just switch a job over $2, an hour. So.
Yeah. Let me be more specific, because you're touching on a really good point here. And one of the things that we do in our program is do a facilitated ride along. So basically what we do, instead of taking a student right away and just saying, hey, go to this fire department and hang out with them for 4 hours. Okay. And now you're basically putting the ownership onto that department with, we're all in the fire service. Do you know what morning exchange looks like? We know what going on and off shift looks like in the morning, calls coming in. It's somewhat chaotic. And now we're going to put somebody who's brand new, into the fires, or has interest in the fire service, into their hands and expect them to perform, right? So what we've changed our mindset on that is, we take an instructor, we take about 4 or 6 students, we connect with one of the fire departments. We are the facilitator that day to help guide them through what the morning start looks like. Once we get comfortable, and again, we're partnering with each fire department. And then once the day or the morning gets going, then hey, all right, we're going to assign you to this rig or this apparatus. When it goes out, you can go out with it, right? So it's kind of that soft approach, but we build them up to, being more involved. And what we've found with that too is the crews, the members, are more engaging, because you're kind of making that connection. And then guess what? That connection starts to drive interest from the student, which then you get done, and we kind of do a survey at the end of class of, what some feedback on the services that we had them ride along with. And the feedback that we get is the ones that they did a ride along with, they want to go work there, so truly it's twofold, because you've got a student coming into an organization, but the organization also has to meet some expectations too. If they're members and it's not very welcoming, guess what? Those students most likely are not going to choose them. And much like what you said back when we started, right? We were going to the front door looking for a job. Now, departments paradigm shift. We're going out and marketing to people to come and work for us. And I'm sure you both have seen that in Ohio.
Yeah, it goes back to exactly what Courtney said. I think the whole industry has shifted, right? And you're seeing departments poach from each other, and it's like recruitment letters going out. And we're not looking for brand new employees. We're looking for lateral transfers, right? So it's almost like recruiting, like, hey, these are our benefits and that kind of thing. And it's it's reassuring that you're seeing that up there and it's not just an Ohio centric problem. Right. But you're right. It goes back to that department culture, and we've got to realize that.
I think that was a great idea of what they're. So we don't
love
have
it.
that. We don't have that where we have the students come with an instructor.
That's
I
a
love
great
that.
idea.
Like it's in our area. It is simply one student at a time. Sign up, and then you think about that. Now my kids are grown, so they're I feel like if my son was to show up at 22 years old and go there, like. How is that? Like you said, like the morning connection, the morning exchange, that's so awkward. Like they would have no idea, so that for an instructor to bring like 4 or 5 students and then place them on different rigs and be that facilitator to just help, break the ice with conversation and stuff is amazing. I love that.
The way we do it now is like a kid who never learned to swim, chucking him in the deep end, right? Brand new.
Yeah.
And,
So true.
And you're surrounded by 5 or 6 sharks at the fire station.
Oh, yeah.
And it is tough, and each crew has a different culture of their own, a different personality. So some are really open to that. Others are like, we've got this kid here. I don't know what to do with him. Yeah. But if you have an instructor, there's that buffer there, and they can help facilitate that all the way around. I love it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And not to get off. Oh, go ahead, Courtney.
No, I was just going to say it's about building their confidence too, because these kids, walking in, if you you're going to get so much more out of them when you build up their confidence, and then they feel like they're a part of the process and they can start to have some of that dialogue. And just from personal experience, I was a career firefighter. I do this for a living. This is what I do, but I haven't been in the fire service for 15 years. And so last summer I asked Jeremy if I could do a ride along, just to get back out there. Right. And I was nervous going.
Yeah.
And again, I did this and I lived this, and I'm in my 40s, that I have the confidence. And so if I was nervous, take a 17, 18-year-old, even a 20-year-old kid that doesn't know what to expect, doesn't know the culture. And so we use a term all the time because sometimes there's this concept or this idea, well, they're 18, they should be independent, or they're a college student, they should be treated like an adult. Well, they're not. They're in this, still in this adolescent phase. So we use a term called interdependence. And it's basically we walk alongside them until they're ready to become independent. Because like you said, it's like chucking a kid into the water and expecting them to swim. It doesn't happen that way. So we walk alongside them, but gradually we're expecting them to do more and more and take on kind of that role of independence as we go.
Yeah, that's great. We just hired 2 part-time individuals at our department, and one of them came from the career tech school, and the other one was already in a career tech. But this one came from the career tech. He'd been doing all of his ride along, and I thought they did a kind of a cool event at the end of their program too. They invited us. You know how when college or high school athletes sign for have a signing day. So they did this signing day and invited us over there. And it's really just for the student to say their intent to apply, not that they're, actually, I know we actually did hire the individual that we were there to sign for. And he was so excited, but he did all of his ride time. So to your point, Jeremy, it's usually where they're spending some time during their ride time is where they're going to settle in, at least at the start of it. And then it's about our job. We got to take ownership of being able to keep them. And we got to keep them because of the culture. We got to keep them because of the surroundings that we put them in, and not try to drive them back outside our doors to look at the place that does have that culture that fits them.
And, to touch on that point as well, we were focusing on the Gen Z generation. However, departments, just a plug for another presentation we do called What's Your Welcome, was truly originated from my observation from what it looks like when a ride along, not just a high school student coming in, but someone in our community that's interested in becoming a firefighter. What does it look like when they cross the threshold? And because like we've been talking about, it's competitive. What are we doing to truly market ourselves? So some things that we've changed is offering a video of what a ride along is going to look like. And in that, also some safety pieces too, for them to know about, when we go on a call, you're in the middle of the street, that we say to the sidewalk, put a vest on, things like that. But my point is that it prepares people, no different than our podcast today, right? We had a couple conversations, very informal before this. Well, anybody would want an opportunity to have a little bit of a heads up, which is going to set everyone up for success. So, so anyway, to move on from that, just, what is your welcome? What is your outward facing look? And how is our members and administrative staff ready to receive somebody that's coming through that front door? And that's really probably a whole nother podcast we could do, right?
Well, I know that I know we kind of brushed over it pretty quickly because we got into a, conversation right away, which is a good thing. But I do want to talk about, plugged in. The coaching and consulting the two of you do. So I want you to kind of start there and tell us what it is and what you guys exactly are out there doing with that.
Sure. So it started just, we're both educators, both in the public safety profession. We're both leaders within our organization, and we just have a passion for sharing our knowledge and our experiences with others. And so it just was, we would have a lot of conversations. Jeremy was our lead dual enrollment instructor, and in saying that, that was very intentional. I always believe in intention. And so it was intentional because he has the mindset to meet those kids where they're at and the developmental approach that I was looking for in an instructor. And so in just some of our individual conversations and things that we kept, improving about that program, that dual enrollment program, we started to realize, wow, we're learning a lot here. And if we're learning a lot, we probably have a lot to share with others. And so it really started with us just kind of putting together some presentations for local conferences. And then as we put those presentations together for local conferences, then departments started reaching out and said, will you come do a session in our officer development program? And so we've done some department level trainings. We've spoken at our Chiefs Association conference. Just the people are hungry for the information, right? Because we have the volume. We've had over 200 kids in this program over the last 7 years, and we have the volume, and we're constantly tweaking. And we're, like Jeremy said, we're with them Monday through Friday, 8 to noon. So we have a lot of time to try different things with them. Each department is just trying something with that new recruit and kind of struggling with that. So at this point, it's really kind of more like trainings and workshops and speaking. We have had a couple people reach out to us to ask if we, just to kind of like pick our brains and like, how can we change our recruitment strategies? So eventually we'd like to get into a little bit more of that, coaching and consulting piece. But right now it's really we've done a lot of podcasts, again, workshops. I got an opportunity to write an article for Firehouse back in December called Don't Blame the Lettuce, which we can talk about that too. But really, don't blame the students. Like, it's really looking at ourselves and what we need to change. And so just a lot of opportunities that have kind of come out of that. And so we ended up creating the website because people kept asking, can we get a copy of your slide deck, or what is it that you guys do, or how, what are the topics that you're talking about? And so that's why we've kind of put that all together there.
Do you guys talk to any career tech schools, or have they ever reached out? Because I feel like some of those things that you guys just highlighted about the simple of having the instructor go with the students, on day one or whatever else.
Yeah, we've presented at our Wisconsin state called meeting, and also at the Wisconsin EMS Education conference as well. So, and we've had multiple other tech colleges. I think, Jeremy, you've had 2 or 3 other leads from dual enrollment academies across Wisconsin kind of reach out and ask, more tangibles on like, what activities are you doing, or how are you handling this, or, things like that. But that facilitated ride along. Jeremy started a really cool program last year. We built this internship. So we've always sent students out for ride-alongs in the program, but he really put together an internship last year, and I'll let you talk more about that, but really kind of bolstering those life skills, right? Because they're not coming in with the same set of life skills that we had 20 years ago. Maybe never picked up a tool before. They don't know anything about small engines, and even just like people etiquette and having difficult conversations and giving feedback and all that stuff. So I don't know if you want to expand on that, Jeremy.
I'd be happy to. We use the Jones and Bartlett firefighting book here in Wisconsin. And as we're going through the course and we're learning about different topics, for example, forcible entry, we cover the material in class, and then we also on our internship day, we'll go to like a Home Depot or Menards, and then we'll take the students and we'll break them up into groups, and we'll literally go over the windows and the garage doors and the lock sets that are on display at the stores, just to understand a little bit more on the mechanicals of it, inward and outward and sliding doors, and talk obviously about passive entry. And we're not exactly forcing the doors at Menards, but one of the things that's created is, and this is all coordinated with the manager of the Menards store, is then the conversation turns into, well, do you guys need any material to do any of this forcible entry? And next thing you know, we're setting up props literally at the Menards, and using old beat up wood and drywall that they have to conduct an actual training at their store. So it was a really cool connection. So that's one piece of it. Another one is truly, it may not have a lot to do with firefighting, but just basic auto technology. How does when you jump a battery, how is that supposed to be connected? There were some things with tires, and I know filling a tire isn't that difficult, but our auto tech school, or our auto tech lab at our tech college, literally took our students on for 4 hours, and they ran them through so many different things. They loved it. And did it have a lot to do with firefighting? No. But when we think of a firefighter, don't we kind of think that they're the toolbox? You're at a party and somebody says, yeah, they're a firefighter. You kind of have a clue that they know more than maybe the next person. Well, that's what we're looking to produce. They're coming in again with a blank canvas. We're trying to give them some tools to prepare them to add into their toolbox along the way. So they're not only prepared for the career, but truly prepared for meeting those expectations of a firefighter.
It's cool that you brought that up. And that's so vital, because we have assumptions, and those assumptions are based on how all of us individually grew up. Right. And then when you hire a new recruit and they're completely from a different generation and they just don't have those same skills, and that's 100% not their fault. They just haven't been exposed to it. We hired a firefighter, never ran a washing machine in his life. So, the rookie's job is to wash our truck towels every day and run that laundry and stuff. And, he's embarrassed. He doesn't want to ask for help on something like that, but had no idea. And then we find out later, and it kind of becomes a running joke a little bit, but it was a legit skill that he had never had before. He still lived at home. He was super young, you know what I mean? And his parents always took care of that stuff. So I think it's really cool that you're exposing them to those different kind of skills.
Well, it's certainly not something that's offered in a lot of the times around in our career tech ones. But yeah, we just kind of, to that point, we hired somebody that never aired a tire up. Mm-hmm. They never. And so, cool. You're teaching them, and you think about they're embarrassed and whatever else. And it's almost like, I remember when I first started in the fire service, I was really a picky eater. I didn't really eat that much, I was just just a really picky eater. But then now it's like I didn't drink coffee and whatever else. Well, then, it's like you're at your big brother's house, when you start in the firehouse, and you get exposed to all these things that you were so sheltered against at the time. And mechanically, some, depending on how you grew up, like in my neck of the woods, I grew up on a farm. So I kind of knew my way about all the mechanical kind of stuff. But there's so many people in our area currently that don't have that exposure. Never changed a tire. Well, you see the firefighters, they'll help somebody on the side of the road change a tire. And I hope you know how to do that.
And this came full circle. I got a call one day on shift and says, hey, the ambulance is out of service. We got a tire that's got an issue, right? Long and short of it, it was a newer person doing our monthly checks. And when they put the pressure gauge in there, it tweaked the Schrader valve that's inside the stem, mm-hmm. right? Really easy fix. It's a really easy fix. But in this auto tech lab, we actually, I made sure to tell the instructor, like, hey, show them that, because they're gonna run into it, right? And it's such an easy fix. We're talking about taking a med unit out of service
Yeah.
because of something so simple that could be fixed so quickly. And I know I'm getting a little tech here, but it's a Schrader valve's the stem that's inside the stem, basically.
So Courtney, is Plugged In, is it focused solely around relating to Gen Z or the next generation, a different generation of firefighters? Is that what you've built this company around?
Yes and no. And the reason I say that is because that's where it started. But I think the things that Jeremy and I have learned as we've been talking about relating to the next generation, we've learned are things that just help you relate to people in general.
Yeah.
So this next generation, like they're feeling very anxious. There's actually a book by John Haidt called The Anxious Generation. I highly recommend it to anybody. But this group of people coming in, they're the younger group, 60% of them are suffering from some sort of anxiety or mental health. And a lot of it has to do with growing up in the social media age. But all of us in this world that moves so fast and is so focused on tech have become lonelier and more disconnected when you feel like we could be more connected. And so a lot of what we talk about is really just creating a culture of inclusion and making people feel like they belong. And that's the whole piece of it, because when you feel like you belong, you gain confidence, you can ask those questions. When you work or live in a culture of feedback that's focused on growth and development and that growth mindset, people aren't afraid to make mistakes, and people aren't afraid to try new things, and people aren't afraid to ask, how do I use the washing machine, right? And so it comes from this like culture of care and inclusion, and then making kind of normalizing feedback. And so all of those things that work for the next generation, they work for all of us. And so we started to get kind of some questions about, well, that's great that you're talking about the next generation, but how do I manage all 4 generations that are working in the workforce right now? And in reality, it's not like I treat baby boomers this way, and I treat Gen X this way, and I treat Gen Y that way. There's these fundamental, really kind of like human skills that work across all of the generations. And so that's kind of where we started, and then where we're going. And we also have found, while we're focused on the fire service, that anytime we have, because we're so passionate about this, we talk about it all the time. And so when you're having a conversation with anybody, we're starting to hear even people in business and industry saying, I'm struggling with the same things, whether it's some of our industrial areas, or even, our business companies. They're all struggling with kind of how to relate to people, how to motivate people, and really how to relate to the next generation. So it started as working with that next generation of firefighters, and now it's kind of working with all people and across industry as well.
I think that's pretty important to talk about, because we're all guilty of kind of lumping generations together, right? Generational differences. And there's some validity to that, but what I've learned, and kind of I think what you're alluding to, is all the individual, it's based on the individual, right? And how you can relate to them. And the only way to get better at that as a whole is work on yourself and recognize that, instead of trying to say, all right, I'm going to treat all our Gen Z firefighters this way. They all have the same individual nuances as somebody that's in the baby boomer generation, or the old firefighters when we started in the early 2000s. I mean, you had to treat everybody differently, just like they had to treat you, based on your own personality. Yeah. So that's pretty cool.
Do you think that there is a correlation between who you're raised by, though, too? Because, like, for example, so my kids, I'm a millennial, but at the very tail end of it, just like you probably too, Courtney, right? And so, like, it depends on, like, your parents could have been a baby boomer or whatever generation it was older than that, and would directly affect how and who I am as raised. Just because I'm born in this millennial time, it's no different than I had my kids really young. So a lot of my kids grew up with kids in a certain generation, but were raised by a different generation than me. Their friends were raised by baby boomers, and where my kids were raised by millennials, which I think is really, really different. Do you see, does that play a factor in it?
Yeah, I think so too. So if your kids are older, you have, you probably have Gen Z kids, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
between 10 and 24. I have an 8-year-old, so he's actually Gen Alpha. So even though we're almost the same age, same generation, we're raising kids in different generations, right? And a lot of it, it does come down because everybody operates from their own personal bias, right? And their own experience. It's actually a survival skill. We have it for a reason. It's recognizing when we have those biases and why we might think the way we do about certain things, and then why we might, translate those values then onto our kids or to that next generation. And really, a lot of it, requires us to have an open mind. And that's what that whole "don't blame the lettuce" quote is. It's actually a Japanese proverb, and it talks about, like, if you were to plant lettuce and the lettuce doesn't grow, you would never blame the lettuce. You would determine, does it need more sun? Does it need more water? Does it need fertilizer? It needs something from you, but you would never blame the lettuce for not growing. And so we say that all the time, especially with our instructors when they're like, well, they're not putting in the effort because they're not reading the textbook. Don't blame the lettuce. What are you doing to motivate them to read the textbook? Because you also don't read my emails. So we're all in this together, right? And so it's really kind of that, like, taking ownership of the piece that you can take ownership of, but recognizing that you might need to tailor what you're doing and your preferences to who you're trying to work with, whether that's a younger member, an older member, higher up in the organization, lower in the organization. It's taking into consideration your experiences, and then how can you keep an open mind to tailor and relate that to others.
I love it. I'm going to drop "don't blame the lettuce" on somebody at some point. I'm going to wait. I'm going to hold that until there's the perfect opportunity, and they're going to have no idea what I'm talking about.
It makes perfect
and
sense.
then you can explain it, and there's like a teaching moment there, right?
I love that. It does. It makes perfect sense. Yeah. It's just kind of like what we talk about. It's kind of very similar to, when firefighters upset, usually the officer or somebody else. It's like, you wouldn't get rid of your kid. I mean, you're stuck with your kid, like you got to love your kid. You got to keep them. So you got to figure out how to make it work as an officer with your firefighters, because you can't just turn to that right away.
I also learned so much through this in just regular conversation. This is my fault. I didn't know Gen Alpha was a thing.
I didn't either.
That's why I was like, I had a shocked face when you said Gen Alpha, because I'm like, I didn't even know. Honestly, I didn't even think about it. I thought Gen Z was it, and we were just done labeling people.
Is Gen
We're
Alpha?
done. We hit the end of the alphabet.
Yeah, we were at Z, right? Where else can you go? We started back over.
Now, so is that the only one, is it right now, or what? Is there one after that?
Yeah, Gen Alpha is like current until they're up to about 10 years old right now.
Okay.
Is Gen Alpha.
Did they, so this is a dumb conversation, but honest question. So baby boomers are the first generation that I've ever heard of have a name. Did we have ones before that?
They did, yeah. So the silent generation, like my parents are baby boomers, but my grandparents were silent generation, and silent generation were born, I don't have all those dates memorized, but they would have been like born in the early, 1900s to 1930, 1940, somewhere in there. Okay. They went through the Great Depression. Yeah. And the funny thing is when you look at generational stereotypes side by side, Gen Z is actually very similar to the silent generation. And it's because of the characteristics of your generation are typically about what's going on in society. Yeah. And so the Gen Z has been going through these periods of isolation with COVID, right? They've gone through they're going through a recession right now. And so this whole idea of like being more financially minded or pragmatic, being a little bit more, they're more isolated, but they desire more connection. And they just kind of have some of those traditional values of that silent generation. So that would have been more like your grandparents' generation. And before that, maybe they had them too, but that's really what the focus has been on, because those are the generations that we would have touched within our lifetime. So
gotcha.
When you go down the basement and grandma's like, do not get rid of that, because she went through the Depression and like,
holding on to everything.
Holding on to, so you had it all.
All the leftovers are going in her purse.
Come on.
I still hate, I hate throwing food away. I'm like, don't throw that away, man. I'll eat that next week. Yeah. I'm glad. I think I'm holding down Gen X here, so I feel good about that. I feel like representative.
You look like a great Gen Xer.
Well,
I'm a
just for men. No, I don't know. No, I feel good about that. But
Jeremy, can you tell us the importance of technology? Can we dive into that a little bit on how important technology is with the current generations as they coming through the school? Because I feel like that's another part in our fire departments right now is that they want the next best software or the next best, techie thing. And sometimes it's harder for us to be able to keep up with all that, being on the other side.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I appreciate that because technology, we all have varying levels of it, right? Of understanding of all the different apps and applications and so on. And our Gen Zers are no different. Our college does a pretty good job of having all the platforms available to our students. But some of the things that we've used for technology to help communicate better with our students is putting some of the things we do, like ropes and knots, for example. Okay, when we teach ropes and knots, usually you're in front of the student and they're watching you do it, but really it's backwards, right? So what we've done is we've taken a camera and we've done our ropes and knots, recorded it, and then we utilize that and put it we use Canvas as our platform for holding all of our class information on there. And so the student can go back and refer to that at any moment, right? So YouTube's an application for technology. We also use an app called GroupMe, and it's just a communication app versus having everyone's text, them having my phone number and me having their personal phone number. It makes it just, from a legal perspective too, it just makes things much more cleaner if we utilize GroupMe as a collaborative space to communicate. And the reason we chose that application is because much like all generations, not many people check email, right? So I can very much get their attention over GroupMe and then say, hey, I refer to the email to go check your email so you can learn more about what I have to say. Or
is GroupMe an app?
Attachment.
Is GroupMe an app? Or
it is.
Okay.
It's kind of like it's kind of like WhatsApp.
Okay.
We just chose GroupMe.
Well, and see, that's my ignorance right there on technology. Like I've never heard of GroupMe. I've heard of WhatsApp, but I'm not like, I don't have it or anything, but if it's an app and it has a push notification, that's usually, so I can see why you're probably using it. Push notification alerts their phone, and then they're always going to have their phone. It says, hey, check your email. Oh, okay.
Yeah. You'd be amazed though. So like we're talking about some of these, a newer app, but some of the basic apps that we're familiar with, Microsoft Word, Microsoft Excel, things like that. They're kind of in the dark a little bit on that. And you have to kind of give them a little bit of a refresher on how to use some of those things, or PowerPoint, because they're in things that they're learning in high school. We've had to kind of align in college to learn what they're using in high school so we can be prepared for that. The president of our college once said, we need the college, the student doesn't necessarily need to be prepared for college. The college needs to be prepared for the student, right? So we've taken ownership of that and made some changes. So those are some of the technology pieces and communication and styles. Just changing it up a little bit to kind of, I'm not on Snapchat. However, the students create their own community and they begin talking through Snapchat. I mean, remember, like we're creating an ecosystem with them that they've never experienced. I mean, this is lifetime relationships that are being built in our academy, and they move on, and they're, I always said, I have from my first Firefighter 1 class, I still have some of my best friends from that class, so I mean, it's the fire service, right? We promote family, and we use some of this communication pieces now to stay in touch.
It is amazing how much they use the technology. I was on my cell phone bill yesterday, and I seen my son had used 123 gigs in the last month. Like, how do you, obviously it's unlimited, it doesn't matter, but how do you use that much? Like I had I don't even know, maybe 10 or 10 or 11 gigs for myself, and it is 123 gigs. And so it just goes to show how much impact it has on that, at least in his case, he's a Gen Z, the technology. But like you said, to create communities, and they're going to do all their own creations, which, who knows how that even works.
Yeah. But another thing, from an instructor perspective is, they'll seek out the information. Like, they're not necessarily going to wait for it. So an example I have is, I'll be teaching and say, okay, we're going to take a break. When you come back, we're going to talk about flow path, kind of give them that little hook of what we're going to talk about next. Well, they take their break, they come back, and I start talking about it, and they're all of a sudden experts on it. And I pause and I go, okay, you still have cellophane on your textbook, so I know you didn't read the textbook here. Okay, so how do you guys know about this flow path? We were on break and we kind of, looked it up and learned about it, watched some videos, so we kind of have an idea of what it is. You do, huh? All right, well, fantastic. Come on up, right? And then I don't, necessarily put them on the spot, but I definitely put them in a position to say, okay, what do you know about it? And then find where some of the holes are, and then I fill it in. And next thing you know, we have theory taken care of. They have a good understanding of it, and I now am caught up with them because they are going to seek this information whether we're ready for them or not. So you got to be ahead of it.
Well, especially now with AI. AI can, pretty much give it to them right there at their fingertips. If you ask them to write an essay on it, and the chat GBT is going to just write them an essay on flow path, right then and there. And then they become experts on it. They just have to be able to understand the limitations of it, so I like your approach on that a lot. Being able to hey, not putting them on the spot, but hey, tell me what you know about it, because then I can fill in the gaps or correct what you think you know about it, because not everything's so true on the internet, and to be able to just help highlight that.
And it's important to not shut them down, right? To not say, you don't know, I know, you need to listen to me. So, because then that just, defeats them from wanting to do research in the future. So, I love ChatGPT. I think it's a tool that we should be, teaching our students how to use responsibly. The role of the educator, I would say, in the last decade and even 5 years has changed so much. It used to be they use a term called sage on the stage, where you were the person with all the information, you had to give the information to the students. We're really now more facilitators of learning, so they can get the knowledge, they can get the what anywhere. We help apply the when and the how and the what, when it doesn't work. So really that real world application and that troubleshooting piece is the part that we help challenge them with, because they can, to Jeremy's point, they can get the information anywhere.
I'm glad you brought that up, because we talk a lot on this podcast, or it seems to be a common topic, is talking about training and increasing engagement, whether that training is for existing firefighters or high school students or adult ed. And one of the things that was mentioned on your website is, Courtney, that's where you feel you have a strong suit, is increasing engagement with students through creative lesson plans or creative training. Can you talk about the things that you can do? Because you're exactly right. I love that you said we're facilitators, because when I try to talk to people on my fire department about being instructors, a lot of them will be like, I don't like standing in front of, I don't like to talk in front of people. And I'm like, man, you don't have to do that. It is so easy. The good instructors don't stand there and just talk to people. They facilitate whatever it is you're trying to do. So can you talk a little bit about trying to increase engagement with students regardless of who they are?
Yeah, absolutely. Jeremy and I teach a lot of the instructor classes at WCTC, and I love that, because I always start out by saying, we're here to challenge your traditional expectation of what education is, right? So you think we're going to stand here week by week and read off of a PowerPoint and, lecture at you about how to be an instructor, but we don't do any of that. We use PowerPoints more so with either directions for activities or visual aids or embedding videos, but we don't ever use PowerPoints with bullets in them because they can read that themselves. And they can read the textbook themselves. They can watch a video. So we use it to engage. And I sat through an in-service in our college several years ago where the guy said, he who does the work does the learning. And so if you've ever thought about that and you've done a lecture on something, like you've learned a ton on the topic, but we know based on that active learning cone that you only remember 10% of what you hear, but you remember 90% of what you say and do. And so it's really about turning the activities more focused on the students doing things. And so we teach a lot through case studies. We teach a lot, like in our paramedic program, we teach through scenarios. And so instead of lecturing on stroke, we're doing scenarios with a pre-brief and a debrief. And that's where the learning occurs because it's that real world application. And then we're doing hands-on activities. So like our hazmat instructors, we hired some phenomenal hazmat instructors, which most students are always like, oh, hazmat. It's like the one class you don't want to take. Our students love it because they're doing experiments where they're lighting things on fire and they're blowing things up, and they're doing tabletop exercises. So when they're talking about the hot zone, the cold zone, and the warm zone, they're actually using like string and setting up tabletop and matchbox cars and Legos as people. And they're creating that whole scene versus just talking about it. And that's what helps the learning stick and helps it apply, from the classroom to the field. It's less of a jump from learning about it, like Jeremy was talking about, just the theory in the classroom to the practical application in the field.
Yeah,
So it really requires that like creative brain side, and some of our instructors are much better at it than others. But I would say even those that kind of struggle with it, they've learned to kind of ask for help. Like, hey, I'm going to do this activity. Like, can we brainstorm how I could make this more engaging?
Well, when you say the other, so I taught ACLS a couple months ago here at our fire station. And so I took a different approach on it because of all the years that I've sat in an ACLS class. And we know how those work. Kind of like, hey, you watch the video and then you do the scenarios. And this different approach was also where you kind of I gave them all the answers up front, handed out a sheet that I had made. Here's the tachycardic rhythms. Here's the bradycardic rhythms. Here's the cardiac arrest rhythms. They're right in front of you. Here's the drips. Here's our epi drip. Here's our dopamine drip, but through the class, it was like where you had put it in perfect terms. You're just facilitating these activities. I set a drug box in a chair before in front of somebody's chair prior to the start of the class. And I set the rescue pump in front of somebody else's. And then throughout the classes, we move through the cardiac arrest together as a scenario, have the students come out and do that. Or if we're talking about the meds, call it out on the student, but have the med in the feedback that came back from that class was the best that I've ever. They're like, that was that. And I couldn't believe it because usually people do have always something to complain about. So I couldn't believe it, in the firehouse, but they were like, yeah, that was the best ACLS class I'd ever been a part of. Well, because you didn't sit there the entire time thinking, don't call on me. It's been a little while. I don't know. And they're always so worried about that piece rather than this, hey, this is a group effort. If you need the protocol, get it out. Let's just how to facilitate that conversation more than just this rigid, I'm going to stand in front of you and read the death by PowerPoint to you. And now I'm just, staring at a screen rather than actually being involved. So it's a great point.
Yeah, absolutely.
Jeremy,
you do have to be careful. Oh, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask Chief Blair, do you take some of these same concepts like on your fire department? Do you guys have a lot of company level training or battalion level training, and do you apply the same concepts that we've been talking about to that, or is that not your role at the department?
No, we all have the same mission of we keep training as a very high priority at our department. So everyone's involved at whatever level. It's not just the training chief doling out the training. It's, in fact, just last day, we have a training chief, but I take ownership of my crew, and I created a training for them, and we ran through it. But to your point about, do I apply some of the things that we're doing in school to our department? Well, our department has shifted, and we have a very, very young, it's becoming a very young department, right? So one of the pieces that firefighters don't like is the shock and awe, right? Hey, we're doing a training and we're going to throw you, we're going to go 100 miles an hour and we're going to watch everyone fall on their face and then go back and say, I can't believe you didn't do that right, right? That's not right. Okay, so we very much implement like, and I, especially myself, I always talk to the captain and say, hey, we're going to be doing this training next week at the beginning of the cycle. Start talking to the crews about whatever we're going to talk about. And it kind of gives that preface, right? Like, here's what, it's getting everyone thinking, no different than preparing for this podcast, right? So then the next day we put it into action and we break it. If you can break things into smaller chunks, and allow people the opportunity to process and then build that. Once those processes are built up, we do a final training where it's in full speed. And if you're not training at full speed, I think people should. And we use the Yerkes-Dotson theory. If you've ever seen that curve, that bell curve of, when we're centered, we are optimal. We are training at our peak performance. We are operating at peak performance. But when we're left or right of center, we are not optimal. And how we stay at center is through developing ourselves and having repetitions so we can build up for the main event. And that's so that's just one area that we focus on is breaking it into chunks, and then at the end, running a full speed training to play it out.
Yeah, I don't think anybody likes surprises, and that's what I think we've all learned that one way or the other the hard way. And I would say that's probably the same for students versus senior firefighters. If you can tell them ahead of time, there's a lot less complaining. Like, put it on the calendar, let them know. I did this with my department. We've got somebody coming in from the Ohio EPA to talk about like open burning regulations and that kind of thing. He's not coming until August, and I'm adding that to I'm letting everybody know about that tomorrow just to give them a heads up, because if they see it on the schedule and they have no idea what it is without any background, there's going to be some immediate pushback. Like, what's this? I don't even know what this is, but at least you're giving them a heads up.
And to his point,
you want buy-in.
Yeah, you do.
Mm-hmm.
You want buy-in, and you want buy-in on the email. Like, nobody wants surprises, but it's almost like sometimes an email is a surprise if you haven't had the conversation many times, beforehand. Yeah. So I try to do that a lot. I try to talk about what it's going to be a lot of times before when they see the email, it's like it solidifies the conversation. Does that make sense?
All you got to do is let it slip to one particular firefighter, and you're like, oh, this word will get out.
That's right. Yeah.
Just
tell Mark, and then you whatever.
And then a month later, you're like,
yeah.
Tell a phone, tell a friend, tell a fireman, right?
Exactly.
That's right. 100%. Yeah. And but I think that sometimes it's very true. Nobody does want surprises, and
I don't.
They just want to. We all don't. But the generations that are kind of on the outs or kind of going out, I think at that time was the knowledge is power. And so they kind of held it close to the chest. And so I think that kind of played a factor between, how we were raised by our parents, but also who we were raised by in the firehouse too. And you only knew, and we didn't really have the resources available at our fingertips as young firefighters to be able to grab and research, to be able to find what that information is. So to this whole shift of just us being able to shift to be facilitators, like you put it perfectly. I have never heard it that way. And that's why I love about it, is because it's just like you are just this facilitator that they're going to get the information. Now you got to show them how to practically apply it and use it in their whatever they're doing. So I like that a lot.
Well, and the thing about being an instructor is.
Go ahead, Courtney.
Go ahead. Oh, I was just going to say, the thing about being an instructor, we've taught hundreds and thousands of students. I am never, ever, never have I been the smartest person in the room. And so the instructor doesn't hold all the knowledge. And even if you might have an expertise in something, somebody in that room has had an experience that you haven't had that would maybe adjust that expertise that you have. And so again, that's why You're not ever really the subject matter expert in a room. You're just the facilitator of the information that you know, and you're just trying to open other people's minds to, learn some of the knowledge that you've learned too. So.
Yeah, and I was just going to add that, Clayton, you mentioned about knowledge, and people tend to harness that, and I relate that to a new person, whether they're Gen Z or not, coming onto apartment, and you have a person that has the knowledge, and the question is, how do you build that connection to get that person to release that knowledge? So I call it the elemental P of connection. So the first one is truly listening to them and asking them questions, right? Taking a minute, ask the new person questions, and kind of that gives you an opportunity to kind of learn where they're at, right? And then M, mentoring and modeling the way. You have all this knowledge, senior firefighter. Well, use it, mentor them, model it, and then the next one is non-judgmental. Just be nice. Can't we just be nice and just not judge people? Yes, okay, fine. They're new. They're nervous. They don't know everything. You know everything. You've got all the knowledge. But hey, give them some space to catch up. And then, O is open-mindedness. Just being open-minded. When we pause and we think a little bit about it and look at things from a different perspective, it kind of sheds some light on some of those blind spots that we might have as senior firefighters, and it creates a connect. That helps build the connection with the new person. And then last one is just patience. Pack the P. Just practice patience. It's hard to do. I get it. We are in an environment where people call 911, the tones go off, and we act like right now. Okay. So we are used to and trained to react. But let's, think about not everyone's ready for that yet. And so we need to be patient and build them up to be able to react to the 911 call.
You don't know what you don't know. And so when we approach younger people or even ourselves, if there's two big points that I thought you made there, and that was, one is they don't know what they don't know, but they also need somebody kind and nice so they can actually learn what they don't know. Because really, if you think about that, like I've made mistakes along my career, and it was always a lot of times contributed to nervousness. And when somebody's nervous and you don't feel comfortable, you make mistakes. And so if I felt comfortable around somebody where I'm not going to get screamed at if I make a mistake, then it's a little bit, it's easier to try to learn or to try to take that chance. And actually I didn't learn in the fire service. I mean, that came to me in the construction world. I was I did construction before I became a firefighter. I was framing houses, and I, in the blue collar world out there on the when you're framing and doing concrete, you got screamed at, And so you realize you make mistakes when you're nervous and or that you're going to get yelled at. So if that senior firefighter or that firefighter could just be that person, like, hey, if you're a good father at home, you're most likely going to be a good officer or a good senior firefighter to firefighters in the firehouse. And that is just be that, think about it like it's your own kids, that are just trying to learn and trying to get their way. And at the end, like you said, pack that P with the patience, because it's going to take a few times for them to get it. Not all of us get it on the first time.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I would argue that mistakes in the learning process actually speed up the learning process, because when you make mistakes, then you have to go back and fix it, and you learn how to troubleshoot, and you learn what happens when it doesn't go right. If you do everything perfectly the first time, you never learn how to troubleshoot or do something when the variables are off just a little bit, right? So it's even more about not just allowing mistakes, but creating a safe space where they can make mistakes. I think when you're in that situation where you're afraid to make mistakes, you're covering up any mistakes that you are making. So you're making those mistakes, you're building bad habits, and you're not learning from them. So we encourage our students, we want them to make the mistakes in the classroom. make the mistakes, when you have somebody there to re-guide you or to step in. And then that builds them to be more critical thinkers once we talk about critical thinking, and people always want to talk about how do you teach critical thinking? That's how you teach critical thinking. You allow people to make mistakes and figure it out and go through that whole troubleshooting process.
I was just having this conversation yesterday, and it was about being pump operator, and we were talking about putting together an in-house operator class, and we were trying to figure out ways to throw in, some curveballs for especially new operators, because if the only experience they have is with everything goes great as an operator, they've got preset electronic throttles and all that stuff, but when something goes wrong, they don't have the experience to know how to troubleshoot and reset. So we were trying to figure out ways to kind of, throw some curveballs into that class. And it's not the easiest thing anymore because they are making, technology advances and things are getting more and more kind of automatic and to some extent foolproof. Things work better. But when they go wrong, you gotta know how to troubleshoot that and how to fix it. So I think
that's a great point.
That's
how to make sure they have a couple mistakes to be able to troubleshoot it, out there in the training ground, and that and as the instructor to not jump in there right away. I got to solve the issue right away. Let them work through it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Josh, too. And throwing in the audibles is key, right? We preach reps, like we got to get reps and we got to get reps, and absolutely we do. Reps are what's going to hone our skills. But when we throw an audible in there where, the engine company's laying to the front door, but all of a sudden we have a mannequin hanging out the second floor window. Yes. Well, what are you going to do? Right? Are you going to go rescue, or are you going to continue to advance? Right? Who's behind you? Is there another truck or an engine company behind? So making those critical thinking pieces is huge. To your point about pumping, that's great that you're doing that. If you have, that's emergent, getting them ready to react in an emergency. But one of the things I've found with technology is that, we have a mechanic on shift, but we are finding our drivers actually taking initiative to start looking things up to try and troubleshoot for them, because there's so much information available to us that, people are being a little more proactive using technology to kind of help the mission of getting things repaired and back on the road. So
we've seen the same thing. And it's very similar. We've got a mechanic as well. Our repair order system, people are not just, firefighters aren't just writing up things saying it's broke. They're going into detail, and it's because they've done the research. And that's one benefit of having, smartphones. They're figuring it out while they're standing next to the pump panel or the engine compartment.
Well, the cool part is hey, if I can look it up and fix it before I got to take it to the mechanic, I don't have to move all the crap out of this truck and get into another truck. That's exactly right. That's their driver, which is cool, and you think about how we're at home and everything else, like we YouTube it. Hopefully we could try to find something or, reach out to the resources, but there's that motivation. And I like that they just try to do, try to fix it on your own. If you can't fix it on your own, then it goes up. But,
Courtney, there was something, switching gears a little bit. So looking at your website, there was something on there that was really cool, and I don't exactly remember how I got to it, but it was close to the landing page. And it was showed a screen, and there was a recording of you talking, and it was about Gen Z firefighters and how older generation, people like me, Gen X, geezers, would typically describe them, right? And it was kind of all these negatives, right? And I don't know if you recall this or not, but then you said if we just reframe that and you used essentially synonyms of those negative words, all of a sudden it was viewed in a much more positive light. And the question that you posed in this recording was, if you ask firefighters if they want a person with these attributes on their crew, everybody's going to say no, because you don't want to work with that person. But when you use the synonyms and it's more positive, it was like, absolutely, I would take that brand new firefighter that exhibited those traits. Do you remember that? And can you talk about it a little bit?
100%. Yeah, 100%. And nice research.
It was awesome. I
And
loved
you
it.
could probably you could deliver that part of the presentation because you were pretty spot on. So yeah, we've done that in our plugging into Gen Z presentation. We've also done a presentation on harnessing the power of the adolescent brain. So we haven't really gotten into it too much, but there's actually anatomical and physiological differences in the teenage brain. And when we say teenage, that's really from like age 14 to 24. So it's even those young adults in the development of their brain that causes them to approach decision making differently, relationships and communication differently, and things like that. So the slide that you're talking about, I usually start with asking like our attendees at a workshop, throw out some names or some adjectives of a teenager. When you hear the word teenager, what comes to mind? And it's usually risky, emotional, moody, all these really negative connotations with the word teenager. And so I put that list up, which is all these negatives. And then I asked, would you want to work with a whole classroom of these students, or would you want your entire crew to have these attributes? And of course, people say no. And then it flips, and it's curious and adventuresome and energetic and motivated, and it's all of those same things, just a positive light shed on it. And it's really about shifting our own lens, because the thing is if you are always expecting people to be different than what they are, you're going to be frustrated, and you're going to get demotivated. When you can shift the way that you look at something, you're taking back control and you're taking back ownership, and so you're changing the way that you're approaching them then. So the cool thing about the teenage brain is that for a long time, researchers in psychology kind of saw them as risky, dangerous, we have to control them. And now the research is showing it's just because their neural pathways haven't been fully developed. The brain develops from the back to the front, so that prefrontal cortex is the last thing to be developed, and it really doesn't finish until 24 or 25 years old. And the prefrontal cortex is responsible for judgment, decision making, things like that. And so they're operating from a place where their amygdala is the main decision making part of the brain, and the amygdala is responsible for emotions. And so that's why kids make very emotional responses and not the same decisions that we would make as adults. It's not because they don't have the life experience, it's not because they haven't learned it yet, it's because their brain doesn't even function that way. And so instead of seeing that as a liability, we see it as an opportunity, because what we get to do then is strengthen those neural pathways and develop them into what we want them to be. And so it all ties hand in hand into that interdependence piece that I was talking about. Like, we can't just expect them to start operating from the prefrontal cortex when it's not developed yet. We have to kind of lead them through some of those things and teach them and give them those opportunities.
Yeah, I think
You did a great job explaining that.
Yeah, that's spot on, and it's super cool. And
no wonder my son's getting a little bit more mature right now. He's 24.
It's not you just mellowing.
That's
brain is actually changing.
Wow. Okay, that's where it comes
Yeah.
from.
It is cool. I'm kind of fascinated
Yeah.
by that stuff. And when you get into like the stress response and all that stuff, and how the brain operates, I think it's super cool. We've all been guilty of letting that emotional response kick in, because that's even with, older people, it seems like that's the more immediate response, and you've got to let that prefrontal cortex you got to let it marinate a second. That's why you don't make rash decisions that you're going to regret the next day. Right. So,
Right.
Yeah,
Jeremy has an acronym for that.
What's that?
Your PTR.
Oh yeah. PTR: pause, think, respond. Right.
Yeah. Sometimes that pause has to be quite a while, man. I've sat on things for a couple days because,
Well.
Yeah.
Hey, let's talk.
Sometimes.
Yeah, we talk. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Clayton.
We talk. I was just going to jump into another section about leadership, so I want to finish this thought on this PTR though.
We just talk a lot about emotional regulation, so I'll let you talk about that. It's kind of your expertise.
Emotional regulation. I'm expert at that. I practice it every moment. I think we touch on this emotional regulation and emotional intelligence, and I'm sure the audience has heard at least about emotional regulation, but emotional intelligence is something that, what does that mean to us? So regulation is truly regulating your own emotions. So what would that look like? Okay, so if I feel like my pulse is going up and I'm getting worked up or getting a little more anxious, I might do things like I keep a water in my battalion car, right? I take a drink of water, that calms me down, that slows my breathing, that slows my pulse down a little bit. It refreshes me, cools me down, right? I feel more centered. Okay, so that's my regulation piece. Okay, maybe somebody who's feeling like they're getting a little bit worked up needs to just breathe on it. Okay, and there's lots of science behind breathing and how that can affect you psychologically. And then other pieces are, the basics, going for a walk, counting to 10. So that's emotional regulation. But what is emotional intelligent? And that's being intelligent. And I'm sure as chiefs, a higher chief than me, you have to practice emotional intelligence every day because, sometimes you might be getting poked by a city official or an alderman or an officer or another chief. And sometimes people are just trying to push buttons to push buttons. So how we respond, everyone's watching, right? We are on a billboard and everyone's watching how we respond. And if we choose to be unintelligent in our emotions, they now know where your weak spot is, and they are it's an open wound. They're going to go for it again. So emotionally intelligent is truly keeping yourself in check and keeping yourself centered and practicing it, and not just practicing when it happens, but preparing for preparing for that moment.
Yeah, so when you talked about how you could get poked by different times, it happens frequently, right?
Yes.
And especially in just in politics and all and even with firefighters or anybody in the service in general. And so it does, the weight, not only the weight of your words, the weight of your reaction, your body language, everything says it all about who you are and how. So one of the ways that I've been able to try to control it myself is I look at it as if anything is questioned on something that, we're trying to do or whatever. I always look at it, I just first tell myself that if they had all the same information that I do, there's no way they would make a different decision than I am. So that's on me. That's not on them. I put it back on myself saying, I need to be a better communicator or a better educator about it. And so if I take that approach, it kind of takes this defensiveness response out of it, where I'm now trying to explain whatever I was being poked about or asked about or whatever. I'm trying to explain it as I'm an educator in that sense to the individual that is asking about it. And what that's done is that's really been able to help me a lot of the ways, saying that you don't know what you don't know. Because if you did know everything that I knew, then there was no way that I feel like I'm a pretty rational individual that makes, decisions based on logic. And so with that being said, I just try to take that approach, which helps me be not so defensive when sometimes you really want to be, you want to just like fly off the handle. But you gotta, it's kind of like on that emergency call, you gotta just be that duck and you can, paddle like crazy under the water, but what you're displaying is certainly not that. So being able to bring it down and just kind of take that pause and reset and say, hey, maybe I just need to communicate a little bit better on myself.
Just forcing yourself to think rationally about it does the same thing as the chief taking that drink of water, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, if you take a minute and you're like, all right, how could I, just a moment, am I doing something wrong? Am I communicating this incorrectly or incompletely? That automatically brings that emotional response down a little bit. And if you force yourself to think critically about it even more, then pretty soon you're like, oh, I could have done that better.
Yeah.
And so maybe my initial reaction wasn't
Because if
wasn't the right way to
if
go.
your first jump is that it's their problem and not yours, then you know, I mean, you just lost all your people too. I mean, it's always that you've gained this reputation. Well, that guy's always right. You know, he thinks he's always right, and most of the time you're missing out on something that maybe through conversation and how our body language is and just being approachable, I think goes a long way. And so that's how I do it.
Chaos is contagious, right? So if we become elevated, the people around us are going to become elevated. It's no different. A conversation that's beginning to get elevated needs to be diffused. No different than when we're on a fire scene and we're talking on the radio. And if the incident commander is, you know, yelling at a 10, everyone else is going to start yelling at a 10, and then nobody's going to be thinking straight. So it's, you know, no different than in a conversation. You know, you need to diffuse it, bring it back down. And otherwise, it's just going to be chaos.
And I've said, if you have to yell, most of the time, the person yelling, it's the problem with them, not the problem of who they're yelling at. And it's this extra response of stress that's come about. So especially in the chief role, if I ever have to raise my voice, that's a problem with me. Like I've done something wrong because we haven't prepared them to a part of where I feel comfortable enough. You know, like if it's a chief yelling at a structure fire, for example, well, it's because you've lost complete confidence that they actually know what they're doing. And, you know, in the training, when they really most likely do know, but it's all stuff that could have been resolved prior to the incident of when you're yelling. So if you're yelling, it's more of a you problem than it is you know, a person that you're yelling at.
And
and besides, you have five bugles. You just have to, you know, you're the loudest because you have 5 bugles.
Yeah, just loudest just showing up. I say loudest, you know, it's loudest in silence, you know, like just showing up and being there because I've just showed up and, you know, I'll reminisce one call. I showed up and the battalion set up on one side of the it was a fire that they had at a factory. And I kind of come around and I just sat there and never even got out of my truck. And then you just kind of just watch. And then they're just kind of like, well, I wonder what he's doing. You know, like
not doing anything.
I'm not doing nothing at all. I'm just watching what you're doing. You know, that's it. And then, but you know, and they'll make you so proud. And that's really why I go, is just the confirmation that we're going in the right direction and we're doing the right things. And that's what it's about. Where I will say I didn't get to grow up in the fire service that way. I grew up in a fire service where it was the guy looking for us to do something wrong and to point it out, and he was always right. And so maybe that was an advantage that I have now today. At the time, I didn't think it was, but I learned so much from who I didn't want to be because of who I had to work for in the past. So maybe that was, you know, an advantage.
I bet you guys get to feel that pride a lot with students, especially like the dual enrollment students. I agree. Yeah. Because that's got to be pretty awesome seeing them gain confidence and graduate from a program like that.
Yeah, you just hired one and interviewed a bunch, didn't you?
Yeah, we did.
Jeremy?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Of our graduates.
We actually did. No, I'll tell you, it was great. You know, on my last day, I go in the lobby and there's 3 of my students from DEA this past semester and 1 from prior. And it's like, you made it. You know, it was just, I think I was more excited for them and trying to harness some of their nerves. But, you know, just seeing them get to be able to get to the interview, and I know we've prepared them. In fact, the feedback, we've not trying to, you know, toot our horn here, but the feedback that we've gotten from chiefs in our area is, boy, those DEA students really are prepared for the interview. Why? Because we prepared them. We did, cold run-throughs, and then we brought in outside people, chiefs, police and fire commission people, and we ran mock interviews at the school, and that's what helped prepare them. They had a resume built, they had a portfolio, right? So they are at an advantage over, you know, others that are coming in. So that could make me more proud than to see them interviewing, and hopefully, it all works out for them.
We also focus on their strengths. So because they're at this, you know, at this developmental part of their lives, when they're, you know, in this teenage, young adolescence, they're just starting to develop their self-identity. And I think you talked a little bit about this earlier too, just having that self-awareness. And self-awareness only comes when we take time to like stop and reflect ourselves, and then also ask others for feedback, on what we're doing right, what we can improve upon, things like that. So we actually ran our last cohort through the CliftonStrengths assessment. I don't know if you've ever done CliftonStrengths, but if you haven't done it, I would highly recommend that you do it. It's a list of, I think, 31 or 33 different strengths. And it's a great opportunity just to learn a little bit more about yourself. I always find it super validating because I read through it and I'm like, oh, that's why I am the way that I am. But then I also recognize like my uniqueness and my individuality that makes me different than others. So for example, Jeremy and I, we like my top 2 strengths are his bottom strengths and his top 2 strengths are my bottom strengths. So we're like complete opposite, but that gives you an opportunity to pair up. And we recognize when we don't see things eye to eye, instead of getting frustrated with each other, it's because we're coming from a different strength set. And then we've learned to kind of sometimes just stay in our lanes. Like, this is my lane of strength, so I'm going to stay here. This is your lane of strength, right? And then it really helps us work together better. So we did the same thing with our students and had them do this assessment. And it was really helpful for them as they're growing their identity. And we were able to point out to some of the kids, like, hey, you're the only one in this cohort that has this strength. This is what makes you unique. When you're doing your interviews, you need to talk about this because this makes you stand out from others. And then you take it further and say, here's examples of when I see that strength in you, so that they understand, like, what does that mean? So a student who's, maybe has a strength of positivity, I see you cheering on your other members in your cohort when we're doing the CPAT, right? And that you're staying positive when everybody else is tired. Or somebody who has a strength of communicator. Hey, I see you being the one on the group chat that's reminding everybody of the due dates that are coming up or whatever, because you're being that communicator. So not only just telling them that they have these strengths, but then also giving examples of when you see that happening in them.
Yeah. And, you touched on feedback, Courtney, and that's one of my passions. Ken Blanchard said, feedback is a breakfast of champions. And if we're not focusing on feedback and giving it and receiving it, how do we measure out whether we're moving in the right direction? And this younger generation, I call it the developmental sensitivity. They're very, we could assume some of them are more sensitive than others, or they're working on forming their identity. They have this risk of this stereotype threat that, I'm a Gen Zer and people just don't think I know anything, which is farthest from the truth. So when we talk about feedback, we don't lower our standards. And as I was thinking about this in our conversation today, that I really want to emphasize that we are not lowering standards. In fact, we keep our standards high, but we do it from more of a mentor mindset, where a mentor mindset, we're holding high standards, but we're also giving support that they need to meet those standards. So that we've observed that when you give them that support, they meet the high standards, but it also requires a lot of effort from the mentor, because if you want them to keep at those high standards, it's gonna cause the teacher, the instructor, the senior firefighter to put a lot of effort into them. And when you do put effort into them, you definitely reap the benefits. They begin to believe in themselves. They are more energetic to come to work because they don't feel like they're gonna, just walk in the door and immediately get beat down. But it comes with wise feedback, so instead of just saying, very vague or negative comments, focus on specifics. What exactly do you want to tell them so they can get better? And then, throw in some of those expressive beliefs, right? So, you've shown strong thinking before. I'm confident you can revise this successfully. Like, you've demonstrated it before. What bring it, let's go here. You've done it. But we never lower our standards. And I can't express that enough with this generation and in the conversations that we've had about this, and people just say, oh, you're getting soft, you're doing this. No, not at all. No, we have a different mentor mindset than you. And the only difference is that it causes a lot of effort on us.
I think that the ones that might say that they lowered their standards would be individuals that could potentially be an instructor, but are an instructor for a different reason than what you're instructing on. You're instructing now because you want to mentor people, where sometimes I think that, and I've been in these classes before, and we all have, I'm sure, is that we've been in this instructor where they became an instructor to feed their own ego. And in the fire service, that's what happens a lot. So you're telling me that we're making them more soft. We've had the standard. The difference is that no, we've just taken the approach to mentor. It takes the special type of instructor to have the right mindset to be able to have their passion be in the development of people to make the fire service better, rather than I want to tell you what you don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Because it makes me feel better.
Because it makes me feel better.
Or they haven't adapted to, they're still doing the same thing they did 20 years ago, and they haven't adapted that. I mean,
and you can tell,
you
could tell right away in some of those ones, which is a make or break in programs, really. Yeah. And that's why I feel like you guys are so successful, because just having this time of talking to you, you might have different on those strengths, on the different things, which is balancing out, that brings both to this table. But the reward is not because it's to feed your own, personal agenda. Mm-hmm. The reward is to see the smile on those kids' face, and the reward is to have them get their first job and be successful in that because they've taken it all in. So
I would almost argue that the accountability piece of instruction has actually gone up. Instead of lowering your standards, I think the standards for accountability and meeting a standard have gone up. And because I'll be honest, in 2000, when I was in fire school, there were a couple of people that wouldn't have made it through today, but they let them, they pushed them through, they let them slide. And that doesn't, there's a lot of places where that doesn't happen anymore. And so I think you could argue that it went up.
Curriculums, accreditation standards. I mean, I can tell you all of it. The accountability is so much higher. The expectations are so much higher. The number of hours are so much higher from what students have to do to what they had to do back then. I think the difference is that we take more of a developmental approach, and some people see that as lowering or softer. Mm-hmm. I think one of the things that I'm most proud of is we have 130 instructors that work in our program at WCTC. And about 10, 15 years ago when I started, it's probably taken a good, probably took almost a decade. But I used to say we were turning our instructors from drill sergeant to cheerleader. And so we had the instructor cadre when I first started, we had a lot of egos to the point where we had to institute a zero tolerance policy, because we had instructors bumping chests with students and saying, you will do this. Do you know who I am? I can make or break whether you get hired. And, we realized pretty quick, like, this is not the place for this in an education. These kids are paying tuition for an opportunity to learn. And so we really changed that culture mindset. And exactly what you said is, we ask them to leave the ego at the door. If during the interview process, the instructor doesn't mention the word student, if it's all about me and I, and it's never about the student, they don't get hired. And so we have a pretty competitive hiring process, and we look for that potential. If we can teach people how to teach, they've got to have that mindset of wanting to help others develop and grow, and that patience as well. And so over the past, decade, we've changed completely. And I see that in the numbers of our students, because we're one of the more sought after training programs. Every single one of our courses has wait lists, and the enrollment has to close months before the class starts. Wow. We have 40 to 50 students on our wait list for Firefighter 1 and for EMT. And the other cool thing I've seen about it is that we've seen a shift from 11% females in our Firefighter 1 class to every class now has between 30 to 40% females. And I don't have a staff that reflects, I only have a few female fire instructors. So it's not so much a matter of like changing the staff. It's that all of the instructors, male or female, that teach in the Fire 1 class believe that anybody that comes through that door can be successful if they work hard enough with them. And the other thing about this younger generation is that you don't have to do marketing of your department or marketing of your program because they'll do it for you. And so when they come and they have a good experience and these female students are coming through the program and they're successful and they felt supported, they're going back and telling others. And so we've just seen these increases in both our enrollment and specifically, increases in diversity, which is really cool. And the only thing I can attribute it to is the culture shift in the mindset of our instructors.
Yeah, and it goes right back to what you said at the very beginning when we first started talking. It's all just basic skills that apply across the entire, corporate world. Fire service doesn't matter. How to treat people, be kind,
Yeah.
And
Right.
and that sort of thing.
Be a
And
good human.
Yeah, just be a
Yes,
good
be a
human.
good human.
It makes it just makes a world of difference. And because it's one of the other thing is people don't just wake up and say, you know what, I just want to be a screw up today. Everything I do, touch, break, I want to do. I just want to mess everything up today. I don't believe that that's out of people. And some people approach others like they intentionally did that. Well, they don't know what they don't know. And so, but this has been great. Is there anything I want to talk about what's ahead as we begin to wrap up here? But I want to talk about like what's ahead. Where are you guys going from here? What's your vision in the next and maybe where people could catch a class at and things like that. So.
Sure. Well, we were accepted to speak at FRI, the Fire Rescue International Conference in Orlando. So we'll be doing a session, and we actually submitted 3 different sessions, and they only had a time slot for one. So they asked us to do all 3 presentations in the one time slot.
Nice. Yeah, no pressure.
So
there.
we're going to try to figure out how to pack plugging into Gen Z, plugging into people, and what's your welcome into a 90-minute time slot. But I think there's a lot of overlap in some of the content, and we're excited about that. We've also put a couple new presentations together on focusing specifically on feedback. And that's become that's a response to the questions that we often get when we do these presentations. The questions at the end are always like, how do I deliver feedback, or how do I give feedback to this next generation or to others? And so we're going to create a whole session on which Jeremy kind of gave you a couple highlights on that, but a whole session on feedback too. So we're just going to continue doing some presentations. People can reach out to us. Like I said, we've been a part of a few different officer development programs. I'd love to write a book at some point. Just try to tag Jeremy into that with me. Maybe just gets a couple highlights.
That's not one of your Clifton
That's
strengths.
about what we have. Yeah. Focus on your strengths.
Yeah.
That's kind of what we have going on. So
That's
Yeah.
super cool.
Yeah, no, it is great. And truly, taking the things that we're learning here and applying them to like my job here at the fire department, and continuing to grow. I mean, like I mentioned before, we have a young department, but we're, I'm kind of nearing the end of my career. So I'm very much focused on what's behind me and making sure that they're spun up so we can continue it on, because that is super important. Same thing at the college, getting some of our instructors queued up so we can keep this going and growing. And we didn't even talk about the first responder face-off, Courtney, but it's just to talk about things that we're working on and growing is something we got actually from Florida, and it's low stakes activities, firefighting activities that are truly engineered to the Explorer programs, if you have those in Ohio, where 14 high schoolers, essentially as young as 14 up to, I believe, is it 20 that we do, Courtney?
18 for the competition, but a lot of the Explorers will go up to 20.
Yeah. So it's low stakes firefighting activity, but it's an opportunity for Explorer posts or new people that are on your volunteering that can be engaged in these activities, but it's a competition and everyone likes competition, right?
Yeah.
So it's called First Responder Face Off. We've done 2 of them so far. And this year we had 4, it started out super small and now we've had 4 counties involved and now we have more interest throughout our state. So we're really looking for that to take off because when we talk about building culture and we talk about building interest in the fire service and departments more of an outward facing versus inward, this is an opportunity for departments to have people get involved, but it's low stakes. It's low stakes, and we've really seen a positive outcome on that. So,
Where do you do them at? Do you have like a local fair or what?
Yeah, no, we do it right on campus. And this year, like I mentioned, we're down in southeast Wisconsin. Just to the west of us, about an hour is Madison, Wisconsin. So they've mentioned some interest in hosting it there, so we can kind of expand it across the state. And Courtney, you probably have to come up with what the website URL is in case somebody wants to look at it. But it's different activities, and they do wear firefighting gear. But it's really been well received. What's that website again, Courtney?
Yeah, it's wctc.edu and then /face-off. And it's basically a competition that we're doing. Florida has done it. They have over 300 cadets participate in theirs that travel from all over Florida. And they do it a couple times a year. They have a really great cadet association through their state chiefs association. In Wisconsin, we don't really have anything as a state. That's one of my pipe dreams is I'd love to better define the pathways into the fire service because again, I can tell you there's a ton of students that have an interest in doing this, but they can't find the pathway. It's so confusing, the amount of opportunities and the way the education works. And am I an explorer, a cadet, or an intern, or apprentice, or a recruit, or a probie, or, what does all of this mean? And none of it's aligned. And so the face-off is really our way of kind of doing outreach to fire departments to give support to those departments that really are doing high school programming, because they also struggle with like, what do we do with them? How do we keep them engaged? And so the face-off is these 6 different competitions. And the goal is that they could essentially use those 6 activities as their training lesson plans for, 6 months to the year. And they use that opportunity to practice together, and then they come and they compete. And then it builds camaraderie across all the Explorer and Cadet programs that attend that as well. So that's some of the additional like outreach and support that we're trying to provide to the local fire departments too.
Are those team based or are they individual?
They have to compete in a team of 4.
Okay.
So every activity has 4 different positions to it. So
I'm going to check that out. That's pretty cool.
There's some video too for you to look at.
We're looking at expanding the Explorer program. Right now it's law enforcement, mainly in our county, but I was just talking to one of the deputies yesterday and trying to make it more of a public safety Explorer post or program, and incorporate both law enforcement, EMS, fire, that kind of thing. Kind of reduces the burden on on each agency and spreads it around and gives them a good level of experience. Something like that would be awesome.
Courtney, I thought you made a good point about the being able to navigate entering the fire service, because that is a problem we have in Ohio too. It's an individual, and again, I've talked about my son being that age. Not that he wants to be a fireman, because he doesn't, but a lot of his friends do. And so they're trying to figure out like, well, how do I go, and where do I, what do I do, and so in our area, some departments will hire you if you live within their area and just send you to school, send you to the academy, send you to EMT school, and go from there. And other places where if like you live in the big city where they're only full-time, or even a mediocre size that they don't even hire you unless you have the education first, the certs, the Fire 1 and the EMT. So it's really hard, and I think that it's also something that we have a gap to fill in Ohio as well, about trying to help these individuals that, just not sure what they want to do, but they want to potentially get in. So we try to push a lot that we do have the citizen ride-along, and then hopefully help to be able to navigate them in ways of, and starts with, maybe where they're at and what their local department is. Because a lot of, again, what we didn't necessarily touch on is a lot of these students don't want to come out with a college debt. They're really trying to
Right.
keep their costs very low and not enter the workforce, buried. So, but
Right.
yeah, it's definitely so that if you whatever you guys come up with that, I think would also be great topic to talk about. But also, we could learn so much over here as well about that.
It feels like a lot of places are kind of just throwing those, noodles at the wall and trying to see what will stick. And so, unfortunately, end up with all these different choices and variables for students, but then it's really confusing for them, right? And they say that a lot of times, like in anything, you should never give somebody more than 3 choices, otherwise they go into analysis paralysis. So, we really like if we could better define. Again, I have probably 14 years before I retire, but if I could better define between now and then, that would be my legacy, is what are those pathways that students could take, and whether that's getting my education, then getting a job or getting educated while I'm on the job, or getting hired, and then whatever that looks like, there should be kind of 3 or different pathways that they can enter into, because all services have kind of unique needs too. So
Yeah, very true.
You
Well, do you have anything else, Josh?
I was going to say, you guys didn't realize it, but you've given me a ton of homework already. I'm writing all these notes down. So I've got to look up Yerkes Dotson curve, I think is how you said that. I got to do this Clifton strength scale. I haven't done that.
I'm doing that too.
But I think I'm super excited about it. And
so this is our job as educators, to give you homework. You know this.
Yeah,
right? But
I know.
Without even telling us
just-
either, you just did it.
Yeah.
just like Mr.
We'll follow
Hammond
up
in
with
eighth
some
grade.
resources for you.
Yeah. And then, and I love the idea of helping the next generation navigate entry into the fire service, because that's a common question. Probably a lot of fire departments, firefighters, fire chiefs get, like, how do I become a firefighter? Well, there's about 100 different ways to do it, So I was thinking about just creating a graphic, like a 1-page graphic with some simple things that will help them, So you've given me a ton to think about. This has been an awesome conversation. If I'm ever up in the greater Milwaukee area, I'm going to look you guys up. And
Please do.
Absolutely.
yeah.
And and I'll catch you down at the FRI. So I'll be down there coming up in August. So I'll definitely pop into your guys' class. Look forward to meeting both of you. And thank you for being on the Triple P. We are really this podcast is born out of the Education Committee of the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. So we're just trying to better connect those younger individuals, and we know that in the fire service in Ohio, everybody's driving to their jobs, and they're just where they ended up living, and then where they ended up finding a job is a lot of times not in the same place. So this might be an opportunity for them to just be able to connect and learn a lot of these different things. So before we wrap it completely up, I do want you just to kind of talk about, what resources, just a recap on the website, where they can go. And then I'm going to try to put all these things in the notes, but if you could just recap the website, I know, and then there was 2 different websites you guys talked about. So, and then what other resources that you might want to just toss out there just to give this last takeaway to anybody that's listening, so it's fresh in their minds.
Yeah, absolutely. Our website for Plugged In is where we've started to kind of warehouse a lot of the presentations, and we've even included some of the snippets. We're hoping to get even more video to include on there, but other past podcasts that we've done, the articles written, and that's www.pluggedincc.com. And so you can find out a lot of information on that site, and we're hoping to build up even more resources there as well. And then the Face Off website that we were talking, that's actually the Waukesha County Technical College. That's a program that we're doing through the college. That's wctc.edu/face-off. And I can, again, send you those links too. But we're really hoping to kind of just share, some personal stories and anecdotes. I have a blog on the website called Current of Curiosity. And it's really just kind of taking some of those real world stories and sharing lessons learned from it. So that hasn't quite taken off just yet, but we're hoping to kind of include more anecdotal, pieces on there, because I think that's really where people can relate to and say, oh yeah, I've had an experience like that too, and this would have helped me. And then even just resources for departments on increasing their marketing or ways to engage, that next generation, whether it's through training or retention activities or whatever that might be. We're looking to kind of include all of that on there too. So.
Yeah. Thank you very much again. Really, really appreciate all of your time. It was very nice meeting both of you. And look forward to catching you down in Orlando. But thanks.
You guys have been great.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, it's been awesome to
great.
meet you. You guys are doing exciting things up there, so it's really cool. So kudos to you both.
Thank you.
All right, have a great day.
Thank you for tuning in to the Triple P Podcast, premier, professional, and proactive, brought to you by the Ohio Fire Chiefs Association. If you'd like to hear more, follow us on Spotify, Apple, Google, or wherever you get your podcast. And if you feel so inclined, please help us spread the word by telling your fire and EMS friends about this channel.